Okay. I think
20.
let's kick off because we're
Okay.
gonna I don't want to run over time. Pat, are you
Okay.
okay to start with
Yeah,
introductions?
I will indeed. So I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time out to attend this webinar today. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Patrick Walsh, Commercial Manager for Aspera, and it is my pleasure to announce this a new partnership we have with TRAILD. I'll very shortly be handing over to Adam from TRAILD, and he will give a presentation and a demonstration on the AP automation solution, which is fully integrated to Epicor. Uh, Before I do that, just a few points on housekeeping. Uh, we'll have cameras and mics off. Any queries, please use the chat and we will respond at the end of the session. We'll also be recording the session and we'll be sending out the link to that in the next day or so. So without further ado, I will hand over to Adam to commence the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrick. And as always, lovely working with you and the team to Spera. Really appreciate everyone jumping on today and carving out an hour of their day to see how we can help you optimize your accounts payable process with Trailed. A little bit of background. I'm obviously one of the co-founders of Trailed, so I've been in the business from the very beginning. The business was established and developed out of an Epicor customer that dealt with both the inefficiencies around AP and workflow and approvals, but also some of the challenges from a risk management and financial control side. So I'm going to talk more about the history of the business, where it's come from, and a bit of background as to how we work with Epicor, how the system integrates with Epicor, and the benefits of the solution from an ROI perspective, as well as from a risk management and control point of view. I've also got my colleague here, Rade Begdonovic. He's one of our senior sales directors, also ex-Epicor, worked for Epicor for many years. And Rade's come along as well to help support you with any questions you might have in the Epicor space. I want to talk about the agenda today, and I don't want to bore you with presentation slides. So we're going to make this short and sharp, but also hopefully give you the insights that you need around the platform and what it can do for you from a business perspective. I want to talk about what Trailed is, how we started, how we're different, and what the platform is designed to do for you and your organization. I want to talk about some of the accounts payable challenges, the things that your teams are struggling with today, your finance teams, your approvers, how you're dealing with your matching processes, things like that, validation and risk controls. I also want to talk about the benefits of AP and workflow automation. How do we make sure that the invoices are getting automated, but also in the correct way being validated? How do we make sure that the invoices are going to the right people in the right in the right department at the right time? I want to cover a really important topic that's been becoming more of an issue in the mid-market over the last few years, which is around business email compromise, invoice fraud, errors, and mistakes that are hitting the bottom line of mid-market companies around manufacturing, construction, distribution, and how Trailed really helps make that process efficient, but also really takes into account the validation and controls that you want to be aware of before you actually make the payments to your suppliers. And then we're going to go through a deep dive product demo. So you'll actually see how everything works in real time in front of your eyes. Then we're going to talk about a couple of customer testimonials, different use cases, and then we'll open up for Q&A at the end. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, Epicor specific, and different things that you'll want to talk about. So that's the agenda for today. In terms of the accounts payable challenges, I could sit here and read all of them to you. You're probably well aware of these are the challenges in your organization, right? The time spent manually keying in invoices, having your finance team chase up procurement. Where's the purchase order? Have the items been receipted? I've got a variance here. What do I do with it? Have I got to send it via email? And where is this email when I need it? You're busy chasing up invoices to be coded to different departments, different GL codes, different jobs. There's all this complexity that sits in how do you get an invoice in and how do you get an invoice paid. And so I want to start with a little bit of a story here. And the story is about one of our first customers that was a large agriculture business on Epicor. And it's one of the customers that's really dear to my heart because they are a large manufacturer of, they're in the agriculture space, but they deal with poultry and meat distribution and manufacturing. And Unfortunately, they were impacted by a process called business email compromise, where they had a number of AP staff in the business, but they were doing about $4 to $5 million of AP payments a week. So they did high turnover, low margin, but they're a real true manufacturer, right? And so for them, unfortunately, they received an invoice from a normal supplier that they receive wood chips from, so wood chips for their farms. And it was someone that it's normally spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars with, that they purchase wood chips and get distributed to their one of 25 farms. And on the way into the business, the email had actually been intercepted, the payment details had been adjusted, and luckily enough, the AP team had identified that. They were diligent enough to look at the documents and see that something had changed. They picked up the phone, they called the supplier, but they didn't realize they'd called the number on the invoice, not the number that they'd searched, and the number had also been compromised. So it went through to the fraudster and they said, yes, no worries. It's our London office, not our, New York office. Please update the payment details accordingly. We're a multinational business, and the payment got processed. Now, the thing about that is the payment only got processed for a relatively small amount the first time that the invoice was intercepted. But then because the payment details had been altered and adjusted over a period of time, they'd been paying the wrong supplier. And they actually got notified 3 weeks later saying, where's our payments? We haven't been paid. What's going on? And they started to put the dots together and realize that they'd been impacted by invoice fraud. And so what the system is designed to do is, yes, we want to obviously make sure that these accounts payable challenges are addressed. We want to make the process as efficient and as effective as possible. But what we also want to do is, yes, the benefits of automation are incredible, right? You'll see that through the platform today. We should be able to take the cost per document from an average cost of €15 per document down to, a saving of approximately 10 euro per document. So, you're generally saving, if you take into account 500 invoices and you look at applying that math across 500 invoices per month, you're saving an average of €50,000 per year, which is well above the average EU salary. So you can have software doing the heavy lifting rather than having people do the heavy lifting. And it's not about removing people as such. It's more around elevating their role to do more value-adding tasks in the business that can enable you to grow rather than spend your time on mundane data entry processing, whether that be chasing invoices, looking to match it to purchase orders and receipts, manual data entry, these sorts of things. So if you step back for a second, you think about it, if systems and machine learning and AI can enable us to do a better job of automating the process, what would your business do with that extra time and resource? What would you do with that extra $50,000 annualized per annum over 500 invoices to help your business grow in other ways? And then there's the question of, well, we don't want to just automate it and make it fast, because if we make it fast with no controls, we're going to pay things that we shouldn't. And that's the example of the Mount Barker Chicken organization, where they were impacted by that business email compromise. So what TRAILD is doing at the same time is, from a risk management and fraud detection point of view, the system is analyzing every single document coming into the organization, validating it against government databases that we plumb into, making sure that the business is verified, checked, and any anomalies are picked up along the way. So the stats were eye-watering last year, and we've just got new stats this year that have just come through. But the estimated cost of business email compromise attacks, so purely invoice fraud in the EU, was $1.8 billion last year. We've had a new report just recently released by PwC that indicates that this is 10 times higher in 2024 than it was in 2022. So it is a material increase in the cost to mid-market businesses being scammed by these sorts of fraudsters to try and intercept different things going on in our business. With the evolution of ChatGPT and the things that are happening out there, they're even mimicking the way that we write, the way that we interact, and they look at our history and the way that we communicate internally and externally. So what we're trying to do here is make sure that your business is protected from these sorts of things. So what I want to do now is, we've gone through a bit of an overview, why TRAILD, AP efficiency, financial control. Let's get into the crux of the demonstration. So I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully you can see it. I'm just trying to get to my demonstration. Oop. Can you guys see that okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Excellent. So this is the trailed in tray. This is the top of the funnel for everything to do with accounts payable when connected in with Epicor. And essentially here, this is where trail can be directly connected to your AP mailbox. If you've got an Outlook Exchange or you're using a certain mail server, we can have all the invoices feeding into the platform directly via email, and they'll just automatically process into the system. We also have the ability, if you needed to upload any invoices on demand, whether it be PDF, JPEG, PNG, doesn't really matter of the file type. Or you can even simply drag and drop the invoices into the system. So you can process these invoices through simply and easily. Now, what I'm going to go through today is I want to go through a number of different examples that your business may experience from an invoice processing perspective. So I want to go in and I want to grab a couple of PO related invoices, non-PO related invoices, and even some more complex invoices where you've got things like freight that are on the invoice but not on the purchase order. So I'm going to go ahead and process some of these through. I would say 95% of our customers have the email forwarding function working because it's the easiest way to get your invoices into the system. It's the most seamless and easy way to get the documents processed. Once the invoices are run through our automation and classification engine, they're going to instantly land in this drafts queue. So what you're going to see is they come in via email, all the data is extracted and classified, and they land directly in the queue for the AP person to action. So as simple as that, when they come through via email, I can see the invoices that have landed and the ones that I need to deal with. I'll be able to see that they're draft invoices. They're in a particular status that I need to action, and I can see all the data that I would normally key into Epicor has now been automated. It's pulled out the invoice number, it's pulled out the supplier, it's allocated to the correct company or plant within Epicor, it's pulled out the invoice date, the due date, the amount, and it's automatically assigned it to someone in our organization based on our pre-configured workflow engine. So we can make this as flexible or as automated as you want. If I wanted to overwrite this and say, I want this invoice to be reviewed by Karen on a particular, in procurement, I can do that by a click of a button. But we also have built-in approval mappings, hierarchies, and approval rules in terms of the mapping. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Importantly, for most of your organizations, a lot of the time is spent on which invoices do I prioritize. I've got all 4 invoices that have come into the drafts queue and they've come in via email, but how do I know what to prioritize first? So the system actually allows you to identify which invoices are firstly PO related. So is there a PO in Epicor? Have the goods been receipted and do those goods match the actual invoice that's come through?
Where?
So from a systems perspective, it's automatically analyzing, is the invoice a PO related invoice? Is it a non-PO related invoice?
Can you hover down the bottom, you'll see the chat.
Oh, Leanne, I think we've got you on not on mute. Can you guys see that okay? Or you're okay now?
Yeah, all good.
Okay. So essentially here, the invoices come through. It's linked to all the relevant purchase orders in Epicor and telling me whether that purchase order is receipted or not. It's also going to tell me whether it's a non-purchase order related invoice. So if it's a general non-stock invoice where we need to do processing of, utilities, gas, water, rent, it allows me to identify which invoices are related to a PO, which ones have been receipted or not, and which ones we're waiting receipting on, and which ones are non-PO overhead expenses. I'm going to drill down into the first supplier invoice here. And this is an example of a supplier invoice that's come through. Now, the reason this invoice is flagged is it's saying here that this invoice is actually a duplicate. It's saying we've already received an invoice like this in the past, and it's flagging it as soon as it comes in from a security perspective to say this may be a problematic invoice quite clearly. So it's the first thing I see. On the left-hand side, I can see the original vendor invoice that's come through via email. And I can also upload any supporting documentation. So from a finance perspective, I can upload an Excel file, a Word document, a CSV, whatever I might need to go into Epicor as a part of that document management process can be managed accordingly here. On the right-hand side, you've got all of your extracted data. So you've got the invoice, supplier, and pricing information that's been pulled out of the document. You've got the goods section with the matching to the purchase order and purchase receipt in real time in Epicor, checking for any purchase price variance or anomalies. You've got your activity log and tracking history. So everything is time-stamped and auditable from invoice in to payment out. And you've got your pre-populated coding. So your GL allocations, if you're using ingrained further and further coding, you can build that too for user-defined fields. And you've got your invoices being allocated to a particular person in the organization. What I want to do is I want to talk about each of these each of these components one by one, because they're really important as to the way the system works. So in the first component, it's pulled out all the invoice, all the supplier, and all the pricing information directly from the document. If I click on the invoice total or invoice number, you're going to see here a big red box appear around the document. And what it's actually highlighted is, yes, it's picked up the correct invoice number on the document, but it's scanning every single field from left to right. It's categorizing what that field means, whether it's a numeric field, a date, a character, a string, and it's analyzing what should be correct in terms of that field population. If I click on the invoice total, this is where the system starts to memorize and understand how you deal with your suppliers. So in this case, the system's picked up the invoice total, which is fine, but I never deal with this supplier and pay them on the total. I always pay them on the balance due. So what I'm going to do here is you can see the big red box bouncing around the screen. Again, I can select the balance due off the document. It's now going to memorize that based on the clerk adjustment, and it's going to populate it every single time moving forward. So the system has got machine learning enabled memory. So basically it's understanding not only what the supplier fingerprint should look like in terms of the data population, but it's also memorizing adjustments specifically for your business moving forward. Now, on the first supplier invoice ever seen in the system, you've got a really high level of automation and accuracy. You're looking at about 86% field population on average. By the second supplier invoice, you're looking at 99% field population accuracy based on that machine learning. And that machine learning is enabled on every single field, whether it be the purchase order number being pulled off the document and matched to the purchase order and receiving information in Epicor, whether it be the invoice date or the due dates, cross-referencing with the payment terms in Epicor, or whether it be the populated allocation of the GL code or job classification. It's applying all of that information from Epicor and learning how you deal with your suppliers. In this case, as I mentioned, overlaying the automation is these security checks and balances, and it has flagged a duplicate invoice, but it may flag a myriad of different things that you need to be aware of. So you essentially don't pay something that you shouldn't. So essentially, if this invoice came through, let's just say from an IP address or geolocation in Nigeria, and the payment details had been compromised or adjusted on its way into the business, the system is automatically going to say the payment details detected on the invoice have changed. They're actually different to what we've ever historically transacted with the supplier based on the previous 12 months and based on the information that we've got stored in Epicor. So again, it's looking for things like, inactive payment information, excess supplier charges, duplicate invoices. It's trying to make sure that as it's automating the invoice data entry process and the accuracy around that it's also making sure that the invoices are correct. In this case, I want to just lean into the next part, which is the three-way matching process. So what the system's done here is it's pulled out the purchase order number on the document, and in real time, it's integrating all of the available purchase order lines and receipt lines from Epicor. So with the click of a button, it's going to bring in each of our associated purchase order lines. Here's the PO that was raised. Here was what the quantity that was ordered. Here's the unit cost. It tells me that the receipting has been processed. Here's the receipt number, quantity, unit cost, and all of our associated coding, including the GL allocations and job allocations. So we have the ability to post invoices to both GL codes and to different jobs. The system is going to check for any purchase price variance here. So let's just say, for example, the invoice came through for $3,200. It's going to instantly flag here $1,000 variance between the initial purchase order that was raised in the system, what's actually been receipted in Epicor, and the invoice that's come into finance. So essentially here we have the ability to deal with this purchase price variance in our approval workflow. We can either have it automatically routed back to the PO owner who raised the purchase order, put it on hold, save it as draft, and allocate it back to Karen based on her being the PO owner in Epicor. Or I can tag a user here and I can say, Karen, massive PPV. Can you check this out as soon as possible? And now Karen's going to get an email notification. I'm going to be able to save this as draft and go back and forth with Karen in procurement until this issue can be resolved. Obviously, we'll be following up the supplier if it's an issue on the supplier side versus an actual receipting issue in procurement or in the warehouse. But in this case, invoices come through, it's extracted all the data and information, it's matched all the purchase order and receipt lines in Epicor against the invoice, there's no variance, happy days. Now, what a lot of customers do deal with is they deal with partial fulfillment. So they don't necessarily deal with the full fulfillment of a purchase order on one particular invoice. They can deal with multiple invoices to a single purchase order. So what TRAILD has is we have a real-time lookup into the purchase order and receipting module in Epicor. So it will show you all the available purchase order lines for that particular supplier based on the purchase order number picked up off the document. And where this becomes important is, say I received this invoice for go-to-market services and printing for purchase order 636, but I didn't receive another invoice for advertising until 5 weeks later. The system's going to automatically match in the first two purchase order lines, matching on the same PO number, the description, quantity, unit cost, and total, and it's going to link those through for processing. But it's not going to close out the purchase order in Epicor because you've still got $500 outstanding on it for this particular supplier and this PO number. So the next invoice that comes through for advertising for Ozone Organics 5 weeks later, it's going to link in the last remaining purchase order line and it's going to close out that purchase order. So it allows you within a single screen, instead of having to run around to procurement and say, where's the PO? I can't see what's been receipted. What date was it receipted? What am I dealing with? What are we paying? What are we not? You've got all that visibility within a single screen with the AP invoice in front of you as the matching process is occurring. And then you've also got that central communication platform here to be able to track where things are at, not buried in email or SharePoint, and have full traceability on what's going on. Now, I'm going to submit this invoice. In this particular case, it's telling me it's a duplicate, which is great. I know I'm not going to want to process this through, but I literally have to type in submit duplicate in order to do this. So this is just an example of me trying to overwrite the system. And obviously, for good reason, it's going to come up as a high-risk problematic invoice, which we would expect. Now, to show you another example, to give you an idea of how this actually works, I'm going to drill down into the next example here and show you the pace at which this happens. So this is another invoice that's come in from Acuity Accounting and Advisory, a normal supplier of ours. Again, it's extracted all the data and information from the document, the purchase order number, invoice total, everything that would normally key into Epicor and AP invoice entry. It's telling me here that there is a receipted item and purchase order line in Epicor for this PO on the invoice. With a click of a button, it's brought in the PO that was raised, what was ordered, what's been receipted, and the associated part numbers. I can see the 2 laptops have landed in inventory based on the part numbers and receipting. The same quantity unit cost has been processed. GL allocations are correct. There's no variance. That's how quick that 3-way matching process becomes. I go and submit this invoice, and for good reason, in that particular example, what's going to happen is it's now going to go through our auto approval or export process. So depending on whether there's a 3-way match or there's not, defines whether the system needs to send it through an additional approval workflow or whether it can be directly exported into Epicor. So allowing your approvers to manage by exception, and same with your finance team. In some examples, you're going to have obviously non-PO related invoices. And this is an example of a non-PO related invoice. So this is an example where the system has extracted all the data, but it's picked up a PO number thinking it's the customer order number on the document. In this particular example, it's analyzed the document from left to right and tried to find where a relevant PO number could be to match against the PO in Epicor. But actually, this is a non-PO related invoice. So in this case, I'm actually going to train the system to memorize this as non-PO related. And I can even turn around here. And if I say I want to allocate these to different GL codes, I can turn around, I can add from invoice here. I can allocate, different GL codes if I needed to. So if I want to turn around here and say, I want one of these GL codes to go to cost of goods sold, which is our base GL code for the supplier, and I want one of them to go to freight expenses, I can allocate and split the GL codes or the job costing allocations here as simply and easily as that for non-PO related invoices. And in this case, I want actually Karen to review this as the approver, and I go ahead and submit this. Awesome. So one last example, and then we'll jump into the approval workflow, which is complex invoices like this, where you receive multiple invoices on an email or even multiple invoices in a single PDF file. So we have customers where they have someone walk over to a scanner, they've got hard copy documents, and they need to scan 20 or 30 different files into the system. So what they can do is, this is an invoice here from Avis, where they've actually sent us 3 separate invoices for 3 separate car rentals, right? The system is smart enough to identify that when the invoices come through, it's a multi-page PDF document, and it actually has multiple invoices in the one file. So what it's going to do is it's going to go through our splitting and recommendation engine, and it's going to identify that each one of these are separate invoices based on multiple invoice numbers and multiple page numbers. And based on our recommendation and splitting engine, it's going to automatically split that out for you. So instead of having to save invoice by invoice by invoice and process them through, save them and process them through, this allows you to have them come through seamlessly via email, get identified, get split, and get processed in for review and approval. If I just jump back into my in tray now, we've gone through all how the invoices come into the platform, how we deal with both PO and non-PO related invoices, and how we deal with complex multi-page invoice splitting processes. In terms of the approval workflow, these are where the invoices that are problematic or our exceptions are going to come. And these are going to be like our high risk invoices, like the duplicate invoices or invoices that have excess supplier charges or inactive government registrations, things like that. And as an approver, I'm going to get a notification to say, hey, Adam, you've got 3 invoices in your queue. These are the 3 invoices that have come through. These are the suppliers they're for. This is when they're due. This is how much they're for. And I can drill down as an approver and simply and easily see what I need to approve. So I've got the level of granularity here. I can see what's been receipted and what's come through in the goods section in terms of the matching process. I can see the invoice here on the left-hand side. So I've got full context as to what I'm approving. I can also upload any supporting documentation. If I'm out in the warehouse and I need to upload a bill of lading or a packing slip, and I need that to feed back into Epicor, I have the ability to store that against the AP document and approve it in TRAILD. I can also see here from a security perspective, it's saying it's a low risk invoice. It's well within my normal supplier average. There's no anomaly or problem here. I can see all the extracted data that's been pulled out of the document using the automation. I can see the tracking history and when it came in and when it got submitted to me. And depending on my level of permissions, I can have access to adjust coding or I can be locked down completely. And that becomes a finance team choice as to whether they want to provide that or not. But in this case, I'm comfortable. It's a low risk invoice. It's well within my normal supplier average. I'm going to approve this and get this exported to Epicor for payment. So this is an example where an invoice should be stopped by finance as soon as the invoice comes in, but this is an example where it has made its way through the approval workflow. So we've got multiple gates of security, firstly being detected as soon as the invoice comes in, then being flagged in the approval workflow, and then being flagged in our final executive review process. So in this case, this is an invoice that's come through and been allocated to me because it's high risk. It's high risk because the supplier invoice is for nearly $3,000. And our normal supplier average over the past 12 months has never been more than $2,100 approximately. So it's a material increase in excess supplier charges given our normal standard deviation and supplier average over a 12 to 18 month period. And we've flagged an anomaly to say that the payment details are actually incorrect on the document and they're different and have changed. So between the payment details alert and the material increase in supplier charges, I can see a note here from my colleague saying that this looks like a problem. And they've allocated it to me to investigate. I'm actually uncomfortable with this as well. I want to stop it in its tracks. I want to put it on hold, especially, and I want to reject it and send it back to finance due to incorrect pricing, which is quite clear given the excess charges, potentially even a compromised invoice, or just say, very strange, please investigate accordingly. So essentially here, what the system is doing is it's saying, okay, instead of having your approvers look at 100 invoices a week, can we get down that volume to 2 or 3 invoices that really matter based on the anomaly detection? So actually flagging the things that matter that they need to look at versus them having to look at every single invoice that comes in, even if it matches a purchase order and a receipt in Epicor. Excellent. So I'm going to reject this and I'm going to send it back to the tray for finance to deal with. And then obviously in the next invoice, it'll drop me to the next one that I need to review. This approval process is completely platform agnostic. You can do this on your iPad, on your iPhone. We have lots of customers that are out on site that get this approval process on their mobile. They can see obviously the risk information saying it's a new supplier. We've got no supplier average in dealing with this vendor before. Again, I can approve, reject, skip. I can put in a comment. I can even upload supporting documentation or download the original invoice on my mobile. It's completely platform agnostic in terms of the way you deal with your approvals. So really simple and straightforward in terms of that process. We can also build in different levels of approval hierarchy and approval rules. So if this was above my approval limit, it would actually grey out the approve button. It would force me to delegate this to my manager for review and approval. So I'd shoot this off to Karen. She'd be assigned and notified of this invoice. And now I've dealt with the 3 or 4 invoices in my queue for the week. I can go back to my daily activities. I've saved not only the AP processing time with the automation, which is great, I've also saved the approvers time in terms of what they actually need to review because I've given them the things that really are problematic or an issue. In terms of that approval workflow, we can make it as automated and as flexible as you like. We have these built-in approval rules that allow automatic allocation of different invoices to different divisions, different departments based on key information. So we can turn around here, and this is just an approval rule that I've created, but this is an example of an approval rule where I said all invoices greater than $100,000 for this particular plant or company in Epicor must go to Karen. And what I've done is I've added some conditions in here, but essentially I've got multiple levels of approval. I've got the first approval going to Karen in the warehouse. Once Karen approves it, it's going to automatically route to Mark for final sign-off and approval before it can be exported into Epicor. And essentially, these are the conditions that I've put on. I've said, great, when the invoice is greater than $100,000 and it relates to this GL code and this supplier, send it through to Karen. Now, I may want to have an or condition here to say, actually, I need Karen or Shraddha, one of the two of them, to pick up this invoice. Whoever gets to it first is okay to do the first level of approval, and then it's going to route through to Mark for the second level of approval. A lot of customers here use these field conditions, which are integrated from Epicor, to be able to route the information to the right person at the right time automatically. So a lot of the time, for example, our customers will automatically route back to the PO owner by default using the rules to say when there is a purchase price variance over a certain percentage or over a certain amount, automatically route it back to the person that raised the purchase order in Epicor. And we can do that. Or you can set it up based on a particular GL code or supplier or a mix of the two. So you've got quite a lot of flexibility in here as to where invoices go, to what departments, to what people based on key conditions within the system. Importantly, we don't want to stop the business when people go away or people go on leave. And we see a lot of customers struggle with, piling up of documents, chasing approvals, and even finding that they're missing out on pay early discounts because people are away or they aren't available. So what you have in TRAILD is you have a delegations of authority. You actually can turn around here as an approver and you can turn around and say, I'm going away for a certain period. I need Karen to take over all of my documents that are in my tray and coming into my tray based on the rules, effective until the 30th of October. I can save this rule, and that means that all invoices are accounted for. Nothing's building up. I'm not missing out on pay early discount, and the business doesn't stop running. Our suppliers continue to get paid and managed accordingly. Once the invoices have gone through that automation, matching, approval, workflow, and security checks, essentially the finance team have complete visibility over the organization. So they can see which invoices have come in, which ones are urgent, which ones are on hold, which ones have been sent in by who in the organization, or whether they've come through the AP mailbox, which company or plant they relate to within Epicor, and everything is free to text search. So I could search for a particular supplier here or a particular approver, and I can find it easily and simply. The thing is about one of the biggest challenges for finance team is chasing approvals, right? And so TRAILD gives you a really solid system and foundation to be able to do that without having to have a huge amount of manual intervention. What you can do here is you can see all the invoices that are pending a review sitting out in tray, and we can set up this process called a nudge, which allows an email notification to go to your approvers regularly on whatever cadence you need in order to say, this is the amount of invoices you've got outstanding in your tray. Can you please action them? You can also still mark as urgent and nudge your users along if you need to, if things are coming due and they're being filtered by due date. Or you could even turn around and pop in a comment and get them an email notification to action there. So for example, Karen, question mark, what's going on here? Now, from an audit tracking perspective, I have the ability to see when this invoice came into the system, who uploaded it, when it got submitted, the GL allocation, everything is trackable and visible from a management point of view. Most of the time, I'll be dealing with my approved invoices and my rejected invoices. So obviously the ones that are rejected due to risk concerns, or maybe they want me to follow up accordingly. I can see here, Adam sent this back due to pricing concerns. It was actually emailed in by Mark. This is with the GL code, and this is the risk reason. So I definitely need to touch base with the supplier, and I will do that accordingly. Most of the time in my approved status, these are the invoices that have come in, been matched to the purchase order, been matched to the purchase receipt in Epicor, been validated, been security checked, and been approved. I can select these individually if I need to, or I can select them one by one or in batch, and I can export them directly across into Epicor. What's going to happen here is it's going to create a group in Epicor, and I'm going to show you that now. So essentially, if I just toggle across into Epicor, if I go back into my AP invoice entry screen, what you're going to see here is it's going to create a group. So if we go into one of these groups, let's just pick one of these. It really doesn't matter which one. TRAILD will have created an AP invoice entry group in Epicor. And what it's going to do is it's going to sync that data directly into the Epicor ERP, and it's going to populate all the fields that you would normally key in manually. So the invoice information, invoice date, supplier name, obviously all of the GL allocations, journal entries, and so forth. And I'll talk about that more in a second. If I just click on one of these supplier invoices, what you're going to see is this is a non-PO related invoice example. I'll show you a PO related invoice example in a second. This is essentially where it has populated all the invoice header information. So the invoice date, apply date, your terms, your due date, your amount, all of the header level information has been populated, as well as it's actually attached the PDF and documentation in Epicor. So the supplier invoice and supporting documentation is all available within Epicor as well. And you'll see it's just loading for a second, but then you'll have the reference number here and the file type, and I can drill down and I can actually view that document within Epicor. So if you have approvers or finance team uploading supporting documents, bill of lading, packing slip, whatever it might be, and they append it to the AP document, everything's going to be stored and available centralized within Epicor. If I jump down into my miscellaneous lines, you'll see the miscellaneous because this is a non-PO related invoice. It's populated all of our miscellaneous lines, reading off the line item detail, including the quantities, the unit cost, the amounts, the GL codes, everything like that. If I go into my GL control, as I mentioned, the journal entries have been populated based on the integration with Epicor, as well as obviously the tax calculations and the tax rounding and liability as well for each invoice. So essentially that data has come through and been synced ready for processing and batching for your payment run. If I just jump back, I want to take you through a PO related invoice because that is also going to be really relevant as to how the matching connects in Epicor. So if I just jump into one of these examples, let's grab another group and we go into this one. We're going to see, that's a non-PO. Let me see if I can find a PO related invoice. I think I should be able to find one pretty quickly. Here we go. That's another PO related invoice. So basically, I'm just trying to find a PO related invoice. Sorry about this. Okay, I don't have a PO related invoice in this example, but essentially it would do the same thing. It would match the purchase order and purchase receipt and close out the relevant purchase order based on the integration. So I'm just trying to see if I've got one, but I don't think I do. Pat, you on the call by any chance?
Yes, I indeed. Yep.
Other Pat, that's all right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find one for you. I'll find one for you.
Yeah, no worries. I was just trying to see if I can find one, but I don't know. Here we go. Oh, no. Yeah, Pat, let me know when you can find one. But basically, it'll automate all of the PO and non-PO related invoices regardless, and it'll match when it's a purchase order related invoice. It'll match the relevant purchase order reference number. It'll link to the purchase receipt, and it'll close out the purchase order in Epicor. So it's all about that depth of integration with the two systems. Awesome. So just in terms of the platform, obviously what I've shown you to date is invoices coming in, invoices being automated, processed, matched to the purchase order, purchase receipt, going through our security checks, approval workflow, and the integration with Epicor. What we also have is our supplier onboarding and verification process. And what this is basically just checking that the suppliers that you've got in your system are verified and correct. So what we're doing is we plumb into a number of different government databases to validate your suppliers. So for example, we're doing business validation check on the banking information, business registration details, and we're checking that information is legitimate and correct. We're also saying, are you paying the supplier in the same way that everyone else does across the TRAILD platform? So has this supplier been paid multiple times with the same payment information? Are they known and verified? So for example, if you were to receive an invoice that had its payment details compromised, And say, like the example I gave earlier of one of our early adopters, if the AP person goes into Epicor and they update something, instantly it's going to rerun the verification checks. It's going to say, hey, these new payment details updated in Epicor are unverified and unknown. It's going to send an email notification directly to the relevant people, and you're going to see that information before you actually process the payment or get anywhere near processing the payment in Epicor. The other thing is everything is easily indexed and findable. So, instead of having things buried in email and SharePoint, you can find invoices and supplier information quickly and easily. I can turn around here and find all of my supplier information regarding Bunnings underneath this vendor search. And I can see, I can even search a part of a PO number if I needed to in Epicor. So say 081 is part of this purchase order number. I can drill down and I've got my full audit history here. I've got my goods section with my matching to my purchase order and receipts in Epicor. I've got my low risk score. I've got my activity log. Everything's there and indexed and at my tip of my fingers in terms of being able to find documents and have them digitized. Excellent. So that's pretty much most of the system. So what I want to do quickly now, obviously, if you want a more in-depth presentation, we always love to load your invoices into the system in real time. So if you want a personalized demonstration of how the system can work directly with your invoices, we're happy to do that. We'll load them in real time, show you exactly how they work out of the box, and you'll get a sense of that level of automation, that security, and those checks and balances as well. So I'm just going to jump back into the presentation slides here. Sorry, give me one sec. Perfect. So I just want to give a bit of an overview of what some of our customers in the Epicor space have to say. So hopefully you guys can still see my screen now, but this is sort of the feedback that we get from our customers. We've got hundreds of Epicor customers all over the world using our solution, and they use it for different reasons, right? We have customers that want it for pure automation, and then they see the benefits and the financial control and security. We have customers that deeply need assistance with purchase order and receipt matching and that variance control and management around approvals. And so you can see three sorts of different customers here that talk about, firstly, the ability to identify and automate the AP process, but also what does it mean from an implementation and integration standpoint? How quickly can you see the benefits and ROI? So these are what some of our customers have to say about the solution. And obviously, we'll be able to provide more of this information to you if you're interested in a personalized demonstration and finding out how it can work for your organization. So what I wanted to do now is just before we wrap up, I wanted to open up to Q&A and answer any questions that may have come up in the session as well. So what I might do is stop sharing my screen or open this up for Q&A. Right, can you see the Q&A by any chance?
Yes, I can. Yes. So we have one question from Graham Marshalls asking, how does TRAILD handle invoices with multiple POs on a single invoice?
Fantastic question, Graham. I'm actually going to show you. So it's a really good question, and I should have demonstrated it in the initial presentation. But yes, we can deal with multiple purchase orders on a single invoice. If we just go back to this example that we had in the beginning, and I go back to this invoice pop-out screen, what will happen here is the invoice will come through. It'll pull out the purchase order number. It could pull out one or multiple purchase orders. It really doesn't matter. And essentially here, what it's going to show you is it's going to show you all the available purchase orders against that particular supplier. So whether it be an invoice related to 638 and 636 as the purchase order, you've got the ability here within a single screen to see all the available purchase orders and receipts related to that particular supplier, and it'll link through the relevant information from each of the purchase orders. So yes, we can deal with multiple invoices to a single PO, or even multiple POs to a single invoice within this pop-out screen. Hopefully that answered that question.
Thanks, Adam. Oh yeah, there are some more questions here. So Amanda is asking, can I add a miscellaneous line on a PO invoice?
Good question. Pat, do you know? Patrick Late?
Yes, you can. So I don't know if you can see me or not, but
yeah, we can see.
Sorry, you can add miscellaneous lines on a PO, so you can mix up lines, have miscellaneous lines and purchase order lines. And to the last point, if you've got multiple POs, that'll feed straight through to Epicor as well. So it'll create the relevant invoice lines with the relevant PO and PO lines and PO releases.
Excellent. Next question that we have is, are there reports which can be run for a number of invoices at different stages?
Yes. So I didn't actually go through that in the demonstration, but we do have a reports tab. So it'll allow you to have track your accruals, and it'll also allow you to track different invoices by stage. The other thing in that is we also have an auditor's report that allows you to actually have all that information within an Excel file, and everything is essentially clickable as a viewable link into the PDF files. So as long as the auditor is a view-only user in TRAILD, they can have all of that in the reports section.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam. I don't see any more questions. Are there any more questions? There is another one. Do you have any examples of invoices with a number of VAT rates or VAT rates?
So we do. So essentially in Epicor, what we're doing is we're pulling through the relevant tax codes and tax categories against the vendor. So as we're doing the validation on the vendor, we're also pulling through the relevant currency and tax rates. So what we would do is we would generally, in order to calculate the tax, we apply the relevant tax code in Epicor to the invoice total to calculate the relevant tax rate for that vendor. So it's actually pulling that information directly through from Epicor. I mean, Pat, do you have anything else to say on the tax calculations? I mean, you do a lot. I know you do a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, so the tax in Epicor is very configurable, and we find a lot of customers have different setups, and we haven't found a system that we haven't been able to integrate with yet. But yeah, you can do a lot of weird and wonderful things with Epicor tax, and we've even seen people go completely around it and use miscellaneous charges on the headers to do the tax. So yeah, I've seen everything, and I can cover it all.
Thanks, Pat. More questions? Have another one. Is the information flow between Epicor and TRAILD real time?
Yes. So it's using the REST API to connect the two systems together. So essentially, any updates to things like GL codes, suppliers, jobs, any of that information is all real-time integrated using the REST API. So TRAILD integrates with a number of different Epicor versions, but if it's from 10.2 and above, including Kinetic, it's going to be real time.
Excellent, thank you. Next question: can you receipt POs from the approvers section?
No, the raising of the purchase order and receipting of the items and inventory has to be done in Epicor. The idea is that the purchase orders are raised at a certain point in time by the warehouse or by procurement, and that the goods are receipted at a point in time, and then the invoice will come in to TRAILD and it'll tell you whether it's receipted or it's not. So no, the receipting and the PO raising and receipting has to remain in Epicor. We don't replace that. We definitely integrate into it for validation and matching purposes, but we don't replace the process of receipting items in Epicor.
Thanks, Adam. That's all I can see, unless there are more questions.
Okay, we'll give everyone else just a couple more minutes if there's any other questions. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to Patrick Walsh and the team at Aspera if you want a personalized one-on-one demonstration. We're always happy to do that. We want to understand your AP requirements, your AP needs, and show you exactly how the system's going to work for your business. It's a really critical part of the process. So this is a nice way to get an overview of what the system can do, but we're probably showing you only about 70% of what the system's capable of. So, you know, if you're interested in it and it's something you're looking for around AP automation, efficiency, and financial control and risk management, feel free to reach out to Patrick Walsh and the team at Aspera, and we'll try and tee up a personalized one-on-one time for you and your organization. Over to you, Pat.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Adam. And unless there's any other questions, guys, I hope everybody found the webinar beneficial and appreciate how TRAILD could streamline the AP process and protect against fraud. So we in Aspera are excited about this new partnership. We think it adds real value to our Aspera and our Epicor customers. So myself and Danny will be following up with you guys in the next week or so to get your feedback and to address any questions and queries you might have. And if you require any further information or demonstrations, we'll arrange accordingly. And I just see there's another question come
Yeah, I
in.
just saw that credit memos. The answer is yes. It works the same way with an AP bill as it will with a credit memo, obviously applying a negative amount and pushing that through to Epicor.
And the recording for this session will be sent out, emailed out to you over the next day or so.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Patrick and the team, and feel free to reach out if you've got any other questions. Have a lovely, lovely day.
Take care, everybody.
See ya.
Thank you.